I recently read an article by The Guardian that was published 8 months ago, and this is the title of the article. It said, if Silicon Valley were a country, it would be among the richest on earth. And the person who wrote this gave a tag name for Silicon Valley. He called it the Sultanate of Silicon Valley. And he said, this is the other statistic that was staggering. He said half of the world's tech billionaires live in Silicon Valley, and a sizable portion of the other half live just north of us in the San Francisco Bay Area. And our GDP, if it was a number, they looked at it, it's $128,308 per capita. And this GDP, it says, outproduces every nation on the planet. We produce more goods here in the Silicon Valley than any other nation on planet Earth. And the economic output of our Silicon Valley is pegged at $275 billion, and that is higher than Finland's, which is one of the richest countries in Europe. Why am I saying this? I think it sometimes helps to get a perspective of the place we live in. If this is the message that keeps bombarding around us, what should be your and my response to deal with that? We are looking through the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus has been opening up for us what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be an authentic disciple. And after unpacking for us how we can enter the kingdom and be part of the kingdom, he gives a summary call that if you're a Christian, if you're an authentic disciple, you should be a salt and light to the world. And we started our journey at the beginning of this year in chapter 6 of Matthew. I would strongly encourage you to read the entire Sermon on the Mount, the 3 chapters in one sitting, multiple times, so you can let that soak in. And in the first half of this chapter, what he covers is the inner, private, secret life of a Christian. He uses the word in the secret place. He talks about giving, praying, fasting. And now in the second half of this chapter, he's going to talk about our public life. How we engage the world around us in very practical terms. He's going to touch on some pragmatic topics, questions of money, possessions, food, drink, clothing, and even our life's ambition. In both of these, Jesus says, if you're a Christian who claims to be my disciple, you have to be different both inside and outside. And he tackles the 2 biggest problems in the world today. There are those religious people, and there are people who would call themselves as irreligious or non-religious, whatever word you want to use. And he says both these groups of people have a problem. And if you ask the other group, they will tell you what it is. In fact, one of the reasons why people do not want to come to church or do not want to engage with God is because they have been fed up with the so-called religious people. And there is one thing that bubbles up as the prime reason people do not want to have God talk, and that is they are called hypocrites. But ironically, Jesus talks exactly about that in the first part, where he says the biggest issue is that who you are in your private life is so different than who you are outside, and that was the problem of the religious leaders, and he speaks against it. So it's not really new that only now religious people are like that. Religious people have always been like that, and you and I would also be that if we tend to have put on our religious hat. But there's also a problem with the non-religious people or the irreligious people. And what is that? The biggest problem with them is that of materialism. Something has to fill that. Despite Silicon Valley being so affluent and having the tech billionaires and, outproducing nations of the world and having such high GDPs, it's the least philanthropic place on planet Earth. The guys who have the most money don't want to give it away. They're always waiting to see, I want to invest in the next startup that will make me the next Google or Facebook or any of those companies. So you see, there is a problem, and that trickles down not just with the CEOs and the investors, all the way down to you and me. It gets us somehow, right? So now Jesus is saying, okay, I've addressed the hypocrisy part, who you are in your private life, who you are when no one's watching, what is really going on in your heart. And he has given us some practical tools to deal with that. Now he focuses on the irreligious people and the challenges that you and I would face, especially for us in the Silicon Valley, and he is going to address that. He is going to address and challenge the value system and the worldview of this world around us, and how you and I, as Christians, as his authentic disciples, can engage and be a salt and light in that. Are you ready? Let's read from Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 24. It says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." He gives three metaphors for us to process this. Three metaphors with two contrasting images. He first talks about two treasures. He then talks about two physical conditions related to our eye, vision and blindness. And then he talks about two masters, what it means to be free and be a slave. And by doing this right at the outset, Jesus is drawing the boundary lines pretty sharp. He says you can either be there or here. You cannot be sitting on the fence. You're either an authentic disciple and a true follower of me, or you're not. And there is no other vivid way these metaphors display that to us. You see, he's not primarily against money. The Bible is not against money, just to be clear, as a disclaimer. But it says love of money is the root of all evil. And we will unpack that as we work our way down. Let's first look at the first image that Jesus says, two treasures. Two treasures. And the summary point of this is he's again saying it's all about your heart. It says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust will destroy." Again, he's not against saving money. Don't get it wrong. Jesus is not against us owning things. In fact, the Bible praises the ant for storing in the summer the food it will need in the winter and things like that. It is not against saving to provide for our families. In 1 Timothy 5:8, it actually says one who does not provide for his own family is worse than an unbeliever. It's not against money. It's not against saving. We shouldn't get it all mixed up. So what is it that Jesus says is the problem? It's in the phrase in this verse that says, "for yourselves." Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. the self-absorption that materialism casts on us, that numbs us from feeling the colossal need of the world's poor and underprivileged people, and ending up in indulging in mindless consumerism, which is now being made more and more easy, that with the push of a button, we can order a product that will instantly gratify us with the same-day delivery. How cool is that? It is that self-centeredness that he is talking about. You know, the problem with materialism and consumerism is that it gets our heart. If we let it, it will get to us totally. And our heart follows our treasure. What we feel is most valuable is what we will pursue. Whether that treasure is something on earth or if that is a heavenly treasure which Jesus is calling us to pursue. So you see, it's again a heart issue. The whole undercurrent of the entire Sermon on the Mount is about the heart, the heart, the heart that Jesus keeps coming after. And he says, moth and rust will destroy and thieves will take them away if you're in this endless pursuit of trying to hoard things up for yourself. You know, the word rust means eating. It refers to something being devoured by pests. And those days, moths would get into people's clothes, and rats and mice would eat the stored grains, and worms will take whatever they put underground so that they could use later on. And it was easy for thieves to break into because most of the walls were made of mud and they would steal it. Well, we may think in Silicon Valley we have home security and, we have refrigeration and there's no way this is going to happen, right? Well, guess what? It happens differently. I know some of my friends, they stock up on stocks. That's the talk in, water cooler conversations in most offices is, hey, which stock is doing great? And some of them have lost thousands in stocks. Or about homes. Silicon Valley homes are a big deal. It's considered a great investment, but we've seen the recession. We've seen things flip upside down. So Jesus is saying and asking us the question, what is your treasure? Because that is where your heart is. What is your treasure this evening? We'll talk about the next thing because it opens this up even more beautifully. There is a reason why Jesus gives these three specific metaphors, because they communicate something. The metaphor of the treasure immediately brings our heart into focus. The second metaphor he talks about is our eye. It's about vision and blindness. He says, 22, the eye is the lamp of the body, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. Treasure reveals where our heart is, and our eyes tend to gravitate towards what our heart desires. So basically, he's saying, watch what you watch. If you are watching stocks, they own you. And a simple test to find out where our heart is to see, where do I spend most of my time online? That's a hint. But now, the reason he talks about the eye is, and he compares the eye to a lamp, is because that's how we let information get to our minds. Eye is equated to being the lamp of the body because materialism affects our vision. It affects what we see and what we don't see. Stay with me here. Now, Tim Keller has a very succinct phrase that captures this to us. He says, materialism has the power to blind you to materialism. Let me repeat that. It's very simple. Materialism has the power to blind you to materialism. Because at the root of materialism is the self-centered greed and coveting stuff that he says not many people will accept they have this problem. In fact, right now, if I were to ask you, how many of you think you're a greedy person? Raise your hands. I can guarantee there will be zero. And that's exactly the problem. He says you don't even know you have a problem. That's a bigger problem. That's exactly what materialism does, because everything else, you'll be sensitive and you'll catch yourself. Oh, I'm lying. I know that's a problem. Or if you're struggling with, addictions, oh, I'm seeing that I'm addicted to, coffee or drugs or alcohol. That's a problem. But he says materialism is that silent, secret thing you will never even see that you have it. And if you are here sitting here thinking, that's not me, I'm not a greedy person, oh, I haven't been affected by materialism, you already are. Just by that. So that's why he talks about the eye, because you can be blinded to a thing that you have. That's why the eye is the lamp. You have to watch out. You have to really look out to see, has this gotten to me? Really? Now let's break it up. How does it play out in our lives, For example, sometimes we choose a job. Let's say, how do you choose a job? Some of you are in school and college and you're going to be in this place where you have to choose a job. Materialism has the power to get you to choose a job, not one that you love, not one that you're good at, not one that helps people, but one that just makes you money. You got it. That's how materialism got you. You do it because it will get you a certain status in life, and you choose a job on the basis of that. And what happens? Yeah, you can get the job. For 5 to 10 years, you can thrive at the job. You can keep climbing the corporate ladder. But then after a while, you find yourself feeling empty inside. And then you realize, why did I choose this job? And no wonder 8 out of 10 people in the United States hate their jobs. You know why? Because your eye was dark. You were blinded to the power of materialism. We weren't as sensitive to this as we would have been to these other big problems that we are watching out. It's not everybody does this, but this is a problem. Or let's take it even further, right? Another example. How can materialism blind us? As you choose, it's not just in choosing our job, but also in the conduct of our job. For example, I was just watching a recent ad of, it's a documentary on one of the carbonated drinks that has taken over the world. And they were interviewing the CEO and saying, this is a drink that absolutely no one needs in this world for anything. It has the maximum amount of sugar in it that can make people obese and get diabetes. And there are so many health risks at stake. Why do you want everyone on planet Earth to have this drink? It was funny. The CEO looked at him and he said, yeah, it has a little sugar in that. We give it for energy. Do you see that? Wow. So the question is, not only in choosing a job, but we know that there are many companies that make a lot of money, but they hurt the neighborhoods. They hurt people with their products. The goods that they produce are really not good goods. They're not saying, oh, in order to make money, I'm creating a health risk for the people who can become diabetic. They're not doing that. And you and I are also not asking, oh, I don't want to work there, because we don't want to ask those questions, because we don't want to know. What is my company doing? Are the deals they are doing, are they ethical? Are they really helping people locally and globally? Is it helping the world or hurting the world? We don't ask those questions, you see, because we don't want to know. We want to be blind. That's what Jesus is talking about. He says it can blind you. and it impacts your decision. And then we pass it on to our kids. We enroll them in like a zillion things because we think we want them to go to these schools that we think will prepare them to instantly get these jobs with which they can make this money and have this lifestyle. And guess what? They get it. That's blindness. That's why he says it's the eye. You got to watch out, And so that's my challenge for those of you guys who are in high school and college. You need to ask these questions. And it's about vision. He says you need a vision. And Jesus says, we all have a vision for our lives. Our vision is going to be guided by what's tethered to our heart. And that's why he talks about the vision. And the third thing he talks of is, two masters. Verse 24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Treasure reveals where our heart is, and our eyes tend to gravitate towards where our desires is and blinds our mind. And once our heart is drawn to something and our eye has blinded our minds, what happens next? Our will blindly follows our heart, and it will show up in the choices we make and the actions we do. And Jesus says, you can't do both. John Stott puts this very beautifully and eloquently. He says, some people disagree with this saying of Jesus. They blindly assure us that it is perfectly possible to serve two masters simultaneously, for they manage it nicely themselves. Either they serve God on Sundays and mammon on weekdays, or God with their lips and mammon with their hearts, or God in appearance and mammon in reality, or God with half their being and mammon with the other half. How true it is. This is schizophrenic Christianity. You can't serve two masters. We can work for two employers. The word here, masters, is a little misleading. The Greek term really is talking about being enslaved. You're a slave to someone. They own you. He says we can work for two employers, but no slave can be the property of two owners. You may think you can do both, but actually, the thing that has got your heart, that owns you. It has you fully. I'm not a big Lord of the Rings fan. I know we have several Lord of the Rings diehard fans in our church. I watched it just once, that I could tolerate it. But the one thing I liked about, I know they're going to crucify me after the church today for saying this, but the one thing I remember and I like so much is how Tolkien brings this ring. The ring, it's one of the central focal points of the whole story. And whoever has the ring, what is the ring called? My precious. It has a power to draw people towards it. It has all these amazing things it can do. But here's the flip side. Whoever owns the ring gets them. The ring does things to them that literally divorce them. And that's what the power of materialism is. It gets the person who has it. And Jesus is saying, there is the precious at the center of all of our souls. What is precious for you? It's something we've looked at and we've said, this is precious to me. This is the thing, if I have it, it's all worth it. And we're willing to do whatever it takes to get that. This is the thing, if I have it, then I am worth it. We all have this precious that we are after. Anything your soul treasures, once your soul treasures something, you will be ready to pay any price to get it, because it's the only thing that's worth it. Do you see that? Do you know what is your precious this evening? Do you know your blindness this evening? What have you been blinded to? It is interesting, Jesus, who preaches this, did something radical with his own life. What was the treasure of Jesus? You know, the treasure of Jesus was, he says, when he prayed in John chapter 17, says, the glory I had with you even before the foundations of the world, Father. He had all the glory in all the world that could be. What was the treasure of Jesus? What was precious about him? He was the creator, and he had everything. He had this absolute perfect union and love with God the Father. But you know what he did? He left that treasure. He left that treasure for what? Because he made something else as his treasure. He made you and me as his treasure. He let go of this treasure that he had with his Father, because he looked at you and me and said, you are my treasure, and I am going to leave mine and come after you for you. I don't know about you, but when I think of it, my hair just rises up on my hands, because I know there is nothing in my heart or my heritage that deserves me to be a treasure of Jesus. Most of the treasures that we pursue in this world will get to us, will kill us. They will make us die to get it. But Jesus said, I will die to get you as my treasure. Anything we pursue will say, die for me, but Jesus is the one who says, I've died for you because you're my treasure. Isn't that amazing? That's what the Bible calls his amazing grace. He's not only our greatest God who came to redeem us and make us his treasure. He's the light who lights everyone who is born in this world. He helps open our eyes to see our blindness so we can run to him, our Abba Father, like the prodigal son did. And he was the one who became a slave. He was born under the law to redeem you and me from the slavery that we were entrenched in, to set us free. If I am his treasure, if he is my light, and he has set me free, ought we not to love him and live for him and be that light to the world around us? And that's the calling that he leaves for us. We don't live differently to earn our salvation, but as forgiven people, as someone who is loved by Jesus as his own treasure and who has set us free, we live differently to show that reality to the people around us. And say there is a better way to live this life. You can live free. You can live knowing that you're precious to Jesus. Don't believe the lies the world tells about you. It's not about how I look. It's not about how much I make. It's not about what car I drive. It's not about which neighborhood I live that makes me get my sense of worth. It's by knowing that for me, my Savior Jesus left his treasure to show how much he loves me. So what should we do? It says, if we go back in this text, do not store up treasures on earth, but store up treasures in heaven, where moth and rust will not destroy. What are treasures in heaven? What is he talking about? Well, we look to the Bible to say what it talks about, the treasures in heaven. In 1 Timothy, if you have your Bibles, turn with me to chapter 6, verse 17. And it says, it's a very, very poignant verse. It addresses everyone here in Silicon Valley. It says, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. And this is what it commands us. It says they are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. It says three things. You want to build treasures in heaven? Do good. What does it mean? It's a talking of good works? No. It says think of someone else's need other than yours first and reach out to them. Not just this week. Make that part of your life vision. Live for others, not for your paychecks. Secondly, he says, be rich in good works. Ask yourselves, how good is the work I do? What good does it do? And if not, ask God to show you a place and a way to do that. And thirdly, and this is the most difficult part, even the first two can be relatively easy. It says, be generous and ready to share. Oh, now it's touching our wallets. Ouch. Man. It's not talking of giving 10% and tithing and all of that stuff. You know what he's saying is, Jesus treasured you so much. He treasured you sacrificially. And if you want to respond to Jesus, that means you have to not simply live out the cross in your relationships and your work and all of that. You have to live out the cross of Jesus economically too. What he means by saying is you have to give away enough money that it sacrifices your lifestyle. You know, if you give money, but it doesn't really cut into the way in which you live, that's not sacrifice. There's no cross in the economic life. That doesn't reflect anything of what you have received. You know, for most people, they're very comfortable to quench their conscience by saying, oh, I give 10%. That's what the Bible says. That's good. You know, it's a good starting point. But for most people, giving 10%, especially in the Silicon Valley, of what they make, means nothing. It doesn't touch any aspect of our lives. Imagine this, if Jesus said, I'm going to just give 10% of my blood to save you. Would that be okay? For Indians, definitely no. I want the whole thing, 100%. We'll go and bargain with them. So it's not about 10%. But in that, for some people, it may be a challenge. So how much should I give? Give till it hurts. Give till you can experience the cross in your life. We're not just talking about giving money to our church. You know, I've never preached a sermon here asking people to give. This is for you. Not just here, give to anyone around you, your neighborhood, other missionaries. There is so much of need out there. But do you give enough till it hurts? Then you haven't even started giving. You need to put your money where your mouth and your heart is. And I want to challenge you today. It's not about just paying $5 to a homeless guy who's standing on the exit of a freeway, or buying a sandwich once in a blue moon to a guy who stands out of fast food to quench our guilty consciences. It's about radical giving, because we have received radically. If this Jesus saw me as a treasure and let his treasure for me, and he came for the cross, I want to show that in my life. I want to challenge you this year to double your giving if you trust in Jesus. if you have experienced this. I'm not saying give to our church. Okay, this is not about give money to church sermon. Wherever it is that God leads you, but double your giving. Or you want to go triple it to show your love for Christ. And trust me, He will never, ever let you be in need or want. And when it comes from a cheerful heart to show the world, where everywhere in the Silicon Valley, all these rich tech billionaires are hoarding up money, waiting to invest in the next big thing. You know how you can challenge them? By just throwing your money away when they know you're not even a billionaire, yet you're giving in a way that hurts. That's being salt and light in the Silicon Valley. You cannot do that if you have really not felt this preciousness of being Christ's precious in your life. And you know the ultimate treasure is for you and me, not doing these things. Yeah, these are things that show that we are His. The ultimate treasure is that we gain Christ. That's what Paul says. For me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain, because then you can be with Him. And I want to encourage us this evening. We are living in a place that literally creates wealth and money and materialism that impacts the rest of the world. And God is calling you and me to be a countercultural Christian by first experiencing this preciousness in our salvation with Christ and expressing that in the choices we make, in the careers we choose, in the jobs we do, and more importantly, in the money we are ready to give away to the point that it can hurt us, because then we will have gained Christ. Shall we pray?